generations. And now, the power of two restores the one.
We got a bidet! Hey everybody, and welcome back from another video. In today's video, we are talking about a new movie, Killers of the Flower Moon, right?
Yes.
It's a long title. I'll make sure I got it right. Killers of the Flower Moon. This is the new Leonardo DiCaprio,
Robert De Niro.
Robert De Niro. I was like, it's escaping me. I can see his face. Robert De Niro's in it. There's also a handful of other popular actors in this movie as well. Two that I can name off the bat: John Lithgow and Brendan Fraser. They were both in this movie as well, so they were kind of nice to see in there. There's a couple more, but I didn't recognize them from just watching the movie. So yeah, so I guess we'll talk about some of our thoughts on the movie, without any spoilers in the beginning, and then we'll talk about what happened in the movie, and then it's up to you whether you want to see it.
Do you know what the movie title means?
I have no idea what it means.
They kind of sort of explain it at the beginning of the movie when they're talking about different Native American meanings of different words. But essentially, Killers of the Flower Moon is referring to a time when taller plants crowd out the blooming flowers, and then the blooming flowers die. So it's kind of that's their terminology for it, but in a way I think it's kind of symbolism for what the bulk of this movie was about, which was trying to get rid of Native Americans. So kind of some interesting symbolism.
Yeah. I did not catch that in the movie, but it makes sense now. So just to kind of give you some of our thoughts, unfortunately, I don't know very much positive stuff for my experience. The movie, for one, is over 3 hours long. I think it's 3.5 hours. It definitely felt it, for sure. I do not remember the last time that I left the movie theater to go for a little walk and, get a refill of my drink to come back. But I felt like this movie kind of needed it because there's a lot going there's a lot of information that they present, and they show like every little piece of probably the story. I don't know how long the book is. I'm gonna look that up really quick. Can you give some of your thoughts?
Yeah, I feel like this movie was a good idea and a good thought, but it just really lacked focus. There I didn't see the trailer, so I don't know what's revealed in there, but kind of just a general overview, right? As the Native Americans have own a lot of the land, which means they own a lot of the oil rights. Well, if you want to get in those oil rights, you got to find a way to kind of steal it from them, right? Through like marriage or killing and whatnot. So I feel like there was a lot of potential for this to be a really big drama piece, but there just really wasn't that much drama. It also could have been a very good documentary, I think, but it wasn't really done in a documentary style either. So it was kind of a noir type movie, I suppose, maybe, which I'm starting to learn is not really my type of film, although I didn't really know that before. Yeah, I guess I just Googled the definition of noir to see if I was using that correctly, to be perfectly honest, and it looks like I am. A lot of moral ambiguity and fatalism, so lots of killing and death and investigation. Um, yeah, I don't know. It just the movie itself was kind of bland for me. There wasn't really that much that was exciting.
Yeah. So I did look it up. The book is over 400 pages. So, I mean, I would think that would warrant, a longer film, especially if you're trying to do it all in one film. But I do think this movie could have used some sort of editing or just different ways to visually present some of the stuff. Like maybe more of a montage for a handful of the big moments in the movie. Well, I don't know if I should say big moments because none of them really seem to stand out amongst the others, uh, which I thought was kind of interesting because, and this isn't a spoiler because you guys already know from what Sarah said that it basically the white people are coming in and they want to have money from the oil, so they're marrying in and killing off some of these people, um, and trying to be very shisty about it. And in the beginning of the film, there was a section where they were showing a handful of Native Americans that were dying. And like there was three of them where they just showed that they were dead, just the dead body. But then the fourth one that they show is the guy actually, carrying out the act where he murdered somebody. And so I kind of feel like they had some idea, like they thought some of them would fit well with a montage sequence, but then some other ones they wanted to give more light to because they talk about some of the events later in the film. So maybe that's why they were trying to show every single one, but and so that we knew who these characters were when they were brought up again later. But it was like it felt like the longest movie I've ever seen. It's pretty close too, because I think Lord of the Rings is like the extended versions aren't too far off from what this was, and Avatar.
Yeah, I mean we've seen some pretty long movies. Anytime a movie's over 2.5 hours, to me it feels long, just like you want a break or something. But this one, I was checking my phone to see what time it was, even
All
after like an hour, which,
three
huh?
of us were like,
All three of us.
yeah.
Which I mean, after an hour, you should be like really invested in the movie and like really excited to see what's going on, or at least really curious. And I honestly, I was ready to leave. Like I was just bored.
Same. And now I will say though, because I mean, don't get me wrong, it's a sensitive subject. It's the killings and whatnot of all these Native Americans for the sake of stealing money. So I don't want the idea to come across that we are, downplaying that kind of a thing. It's just that I kind of feel like the visually, like it's a movie. They're supposed to be presenting the information in a way where we can be engaged with the film. And just like the book, I'm sure the book is written in a way where, people were really engaged with it. That's why there's a movie. So I feel like they should have done a better job, with the cinema side of things to present the information. And maybe that would have helped it a little bit. I think they should have found some more creative ways to present the information, which may have, brought that 3.5 hours down to maybe even 3 hours would have helped it a bit, I think. But yeah, there was a lot that happened, but there really wasn't anything where it was like, wow, now I'm invested. I'm trying to figure this out. Because they kind of even reveal right away what the whole thing is going on. And so we're just sitting there like, okay, we know we know what happened. Is this going to get taken care of? And it just keeps going on and on about more of the things that this group is doing. And then once we finally get to a part where we find out that they're gonna have some things happen to them, if there's still like the other half of the movie to go, and it's just like, oh my goodness gracious. But
I think you were right on with, the story itself is one that I think is worth telling for sure. It's just the way that they told it was not very engaging or very interesting. Even if they had approached it from like a documentary type style, I think that would have done a lot better than what they did.
yeah, and I will say too, because my dad is the one that wanted to go see the movie, so we went with him. And when the movie was over, he had said like, "Well, I didn't really think that was what it was going to be based off the trailer." So even the trailer might be a little bit misleading as far as what's going on. But let's go ahead and give our ratings here. Um, I guess I'll kick it off. We did not tell each other. Sarah told me specifically not to tell her. And I am sorry, but this one's a 1 out of 10 for me. It's not a 0 because it is a film, with a plot and all that stuff. And so it should get a point. But there was not one part of the movie where I was pulled in and wanting to figure out what was happening. There was another thing that we really didn't mention is there's a lot of sections where they're talking, and when they're talking, it feels like they are drawing out the scene as far as
There's a lot of rambling.
Yeah, they're rambling, they're talking very slow. It seems like they're trying to do some like really big character development, but it just at times it was like, if this was a conversation I would have with somebody, I would figure out something to get it going. Like really nothing was propelling some of these very slow conversations. I think the one that probably was the best was like when De Niro's character was talking to DiCaprio's character about, what kind of women does he like? And like that was the one time where I was like, okay, I mean, we're gonna get something interesting here, I suppose. But like everything else, it was, you came from the war, what'd you do? I was a cook. And then he was like, well, my cooking wasn't as bad as the flu, because I guess De Niro made a comment about like how maybe his cooking would have killed him or something because he was a crappy cook. And it's just like, come on, let's move. So yeah, I'm gonna give it a 1 out of 10. It's the first one ever here on the channel, I think. But I kept thinking to myself, can I give it a 3? Can I give it a 4? And my gut was like, this is overshooting. So I just kept going down.
I'm sitting at a 2. I feel like a 1 for me has got to be unwatchable, and I know that I said I wanted to leave, and this was pretty bad. However, the story itself I still think is interesting, and if there was like a bad story or like no story at all, I think that's where I would have gone with a 1 maybe, because I do like the idea of the movie. I just don't like how it was executed. So I think that's why I'm putting it at a 2. But one of the other things that bothered me that's not a spoiler that we haven't talked about before is sometimes they are speaking in their native language. I apologize, I don't know what language that is. Maybe it's Osage language. I honestly don't know. I don't remember what tribe they said they were from. But anyway, so some of the times they're speaking the native language and it's subtitled, which is fine. But then sometimes it's not subtitled. So they'll have an argument back and forth about something, and they'll just go back and forth in that other language with no subtitles. And this isn't a situation where there's somebody in the room that doesn't know that language. So that's why it's not subtitled, because they're not supposed to know what they're saying. This is two people who know what each other is saying, but we as the audience don't know. And that's a time where I think it should be subtitled. So that was, it happened on a handful of occasions, and I thought that was very annoying.
I didn't pick up on, well, there was so much that happened in the movie. I just don't remember it happening.
Some of the shots were not my favorite either. If you've seen my movie reviews before, you know that I get motion sickness sometimes, and there was a lot of spinning. There was a time where, when DiCaprio's character came home from the war, and so he gave Robert De Niro's character a hug. So they show one character, they spin around to show the other character, then they continue spinning to show the first one, and then they spin again. So it's like what do you call it? A 720 spin. Like they just kept spinning around these characters when all they were doing was hugging. Like there wasn't even anything crazy happening behind them or like a reason to spin so much. I was like, okay, I get the point.
I don't remember that either.
It was all like the very beginning of the movie.
That's probably when I was
But
feeling bad about myself for eating the whole bag of Oreo popcorn before the movie even started. All right, so we gave our ratings. Sarah is actually going to give us the spoiler section here. Of course, a lot happened, but we're going to try our best to keep it a little more concise than the movie was. So, what happened in this film, Sarah?
all right, so spoiler section starting now. DiCaprio's character, whose name is Ernest, he has come home from the war. And he's going to live with his uncle, William Hale, who's played by Robert De Niro. He's kind of an awkward kid slash he's probably around 20 or something like that in this film. But he gets a job as kind of being like a taxi driver, and so he starts driving around Molly, who is on my screen right here, and she's actually behind Jeremy in his background also. So she is one of the Native Americans there whose family owns a big oil rig. They see each other a whole bunch. They kind of fall in love. Robert De Niro's character wants him to marry Molly so that they can be married into the actual oil money. But we get a sense that DiCaprio's character is kind of more in it for the love, and he's kind of tied between love versus money because he really likes money. The remainder of this movie is a lot of shisty family members of Molly's dying, being murdered, and having it made to be look like a suicide, or maybe it's just a murder and nobody knows who it is because William Hale, Robert De Niro's character, he's kind of like a sheriff, but he's not the sheriff, but he has a lot of power in the town. We've seen some scenes of Leonardo DiCaprio's character stealing jewelry off people. They go so far as digging up one of Molly's sisters after she's been buried because he specifically had her buried with her jewelry. That way he could dig it up later to gamble it away. This is also a time where diabetes was like a big killer, and they were just discovering insulin, which luckily Molly was rich enough that she was able to afford the insulin, which DiCaprio later ends up poisoning. So she gets very sick. That way she can't really make decisions for herself, and he is able to be in total control over her. So if that's a trigger for you, stay away from this film. Kind of the ending, I'm going to jump right to the end unless you think there's something more that we need to cover.
No, just basically when the detective shows up and, all that stuff starts happening.
Oh, yes. Before her insulin is drugged, she manages to get a train ticket to go to Washington, D.C. That way she can beg the president or the president's assistance for help because the sheriff in her town isn't doing anything about the Native Americans being killed, even though at this point the death count is like 30 people, and they're just a whole bunch of bad luck, quote unquote. So the FBI actually does come and start investigating things. That's a good point because that's kind of why the movie ends the way it does. They start to gather little bits and pieces of information.
I did not know this from the movie, but the book title also implies that.
What is the book title?
Hold on. I guess I X'd out of it. Let me see. The book title is called Killers of the Flower Moon, the Osage Murders and the Birth of the FBI. So this was like the beginning of the FBI becoming a thing.
I gotcha. Interesting. Yeah, so this is kind of what's supposed to be kind of an exciting time in terms of the FBI being started, and maybe not exciting is probably not the greatest word, but there's a lot of very major events. They're finally getting money for all this oil and whatnot because oil is actually a necessity now, so they're starting to become very rich, which ultimately kind of leads to their demise. But anyway, so the FBI comes in. They start to gather little bits and pieces of information from different people around town and starts to pin some of the people that are involved in these murders against each other. There's a whole lot of from DiCaprio's character, do I testify against my uncle, who's been kind of the ringleader of this, and then side with the Native Americans, or do I not testify against him and trust that he's going to help me get out of this? Ultimately, he does testify against him. And in the very end of the film, we switch gears completely. So instead of it being reenactments of everything and like the actual rest of the movie, it is a radio host with a live band and a live audience describing what happened to the family after that. So like, how Molly divorced him and wound up remarrying, and she lived to be age 50 and ultimately died of diabetes. And what happened to DiCaprio's character and how he went to prison for his help in poisoning Molly. How De Niro's character ultimately got out on good behavior and whatnot. So all this stuff is kind of summed up at the very end in like a 2-minute live radio show, which is a very different pace than the rest of the movie. So I thought that was an interesting change of gears.
It was arguably my favorite part of the film because it showed me something interesting about, back in those days. I can imagine what the 20s are like and stuff when this stuff is happening, but that was like the one piece of information where it was like, oh, that's kind of cool how they did that stuff. Because everything else just kind of seemed like a Western town in the 20s, and then, crazy things are happening.
As they were telling that story on that live radio channel, they were doing different sound effects. And so that's kind of the piece that Jeremy's referring to. So like when they talked about Robert De Niro's character writing somebody a letter from prison, they had a pencil scraping on paper to make that sound effect. Or they had jail bars slam when they said that he went to jail. They had somebody typing on a typewriter when they were talking about an obituary that was written. So you could hear the typewriter typing and just all kinds of different things like that.
Yeah.
But that is kind of your Cliff Notes version of the movie. There's obviously a lot more. Molly has, I think, 3 different sisters plus her mom that die over the course of the film. And so there's very long, drawn out character development of each of those characters. And then a lot of actual visualization of their death. Visualization of the afterlife and all that. There's different mixes between social rights and how the Native Americans couldn't access their bank account unless they were accompanied by, I think, somebody who was white, or maybe even just a white man, probably, because I'm guessing women didn't have access to bank accounts just in general. There's a lot of questioning on being able to withdraw money from your bank account, even if it's for like a medical necessity and needing special approval for that, even though it's your own money. So there's politics like that involved. There's just all kinds of crazy things that go on in this movie. And I wish I could say it's crazy as in interesting, but I mean more crazy as in random. And not really well explained, and just kind of like, why was that a part of the film? I know another one of them that we had talked about was that I think it was on 2 separate occasions they mentioned the Ku Klux Klan, and they had a parade at one point where you could see a whole bunch of people in those white hoods. But what that had to do with the rest of the movie, I have no idea, because there were no African Americans in this movie that I remember seeing. So it wasn't a whites versus blacks kind of a thing in this particular film. So I don't understand why that part, what did it add to this film? And there's so many different things like that that I feel like I could say, well, what did this actually add to this film? And the answer is not a whole lot. So it was just really drawn out.
One
Um,
thing I did think was a little interesting was when it's Molly, right?
yeah.
When Molly's mom was in the process of passing away, she saw this owl like hallucinating. And she had said to Molly, like, when you're close to passing, you see this owl. And Molly did see the owl at one point, but she didn't die until much later, because that was when she was still with Ernest, and then she ended up dying after remarrying later and stuff. So I thought that
I
was
think
kind of interesting. Like maybe that was
I think it was you see the owl when you're dying because at that point she was dying,
oh, I don't
but
know.
she was brought to a hospital and then got better, so she wasn't dying anymore.
I don't know, but maybe that's like a cultural thing, and that that was kind of cool to see, or well, not see, but learn, I should say.
That was an interesting interpretation to be able to visualize that.
Yeah, but I guess just to back up, it was now that we can talk about some spoilers to back up, why I said the 1 out of 10. We learn about Ernest's character quite a bit in the beginning with a lot of those drawn out conversations that we mentioned. But then when we get into all the different siblings that are dying, it was basically a setup for the kill. The kill happens, and then the families are told, and we see Molly cry a lot. She cries a lot in this film. I wouldn't be surprised if that was part of her audition, was how well can you cry kind of a thing. But then, like, probably around that 1 hour mark, we learn that Ernest is the one that's basically setting up all these different killings. And so, like, there's no mystery, because I remember Sarah leaned over to me in like the first 30 minutes or so, and she was like, I think it's Ernest that's, plotting all this stuff. And if
I'd
this,
said De Niro.
what?
I'd said it was De Niro's character,
Oh, I
which
thought you
was
said
William
Ernest.
Hale.
But either way, they showed it right away, within the first third of the film, that yes, it is them. And so, like I was saying in the non-spoiler section, once I knew that, I was like, okay, when are they going to get found out? Like that should be happening somewhat soon after that. And it wasn't for another hour of the film that they finally, start getting in some trouble. And so I kind of felt like them telling us that, oh, hey, this is who it was, that kind of dragged it out because the mystery was gone. There was no reason for us to, be invested and find out who is the one killing, these people, who's behind it, because they were showing that there is like a whole web of people that were involved. And so, they could have had maybe us learning with the detectives who was doing all this stuff, because if they would have done it that way, then we would have been invested. We would have been wanting to be like, okay, what is the detective finding out here? Okay, maybe that means this person's involved. Excuse me. And because there were so many people that were involved, I think they could have played it out a lot better instead of just telling us right away and then, seeing everything happen. I think that was the misstep, in my opinion.
I think that would have added some more suspense. But for as long as this movie was, when they were talking at the end about, did you have so and so help you, or who is the one that lit the explosives under this person's house, and they were talking about all these different people's names. I only knew about half the people they were referencing because like the name sounded familiar, but who it actually was, I don't know, because the cast list was so large. There were so many different characters involved in these different things, which for the movie to be as long as it was, I feel like I should have been able to remember some of these people.
I feel like what they could have done is they could have cut all the different scenes where we were learning about Ernest and uh, Hale's character plotting all this stuff. If they would have cut all of that, and then we learn with the detectives, and then just like flash the character from time to time of an instance where we did see those characters earlier on in the film, I think that would have added to it a little bit more,
Yeah.
especially on the time perspective, because we probably could have like I said, chopped at least in a half hour out of this film. But I mean, those are my thoughts on the film. Did you have any others?
Not really. I guess just as a kind of final closing thing, and then one thing that we haven't mentioned, this was a Apple film, which is the first Apple film I think that either of us have watched. And boy, it doesn't really have me jumping to sign up for Apple TV anytime soon. So,
No.
yep.
Yeah, I thought that was kind of interesting too, because they also advertised like one or two Apple movies before the movie started. And yeah, this isn't the greatest first impression, to say the least. But if you enjoyed our discussion of the film, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. That way you are notified when more of our movie discussions drop. We will be doing a movie discussion on Five Nights at Freddy's next week, which we are super excited about. So stay tuned for that. Drops a like if you like the video, and drops a comment letting us know your thoughts on Killers of the Flower Moon. And then, as always, everybody, thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.